Well, let's move from branding to advertising now. And Gary Leih is really a big cheese in the advertising industry. With more than 30 years' experience and a stint as the chief executive of the London Ogilvy agency, he decided to retire at the age of 50 and come back to South Africa to wait out his gardening leave. Well, that's over, and he's just started the OFYT agency, which stands for Old Friends Young Talent. And he hasn't lost any of his passion for advertising and the development of young advertising hopefuls. I met with him just a few days ago, and we started off by talking about if there is still space for the big network agencies.
I think it's been more about the financial side, the accumulator side of agencies. So what's actually happened is about 70% of the industry is now controlled by about 5 or 6 listed entities. And these are controlled by the stock exchange rules, and therefore they have to do their quarterly reporting and their annual reports, and basically they have to be seen to grow on a quarterly basis and on an annual basis in order to generate shareholder wealth. And that puts enormous pressure on the individual agencies that make up the network to make the figures work, and to make the figures work all the time. And my training was always, if you do the right thing, the money will come. And I think, unfortunately, because of the monetization of the industry, what's actually happening is that the money's being put first. And that makes you make decisions at times that maybe you're not that comfortable with. If it was your business, you probably wouldn't play it that way. But understanding that it's a listed entity, you kind of understand that's why they do it.
Point is taken. I mean, it's a fairly controversial point, because having said that, does that have an impact on the relationship with the client and, perhaps more importantly, the output of the agency?
Most of the international networks work with international clients, and therefore it's basically structured somewhat around what the client's needs are and not vice versa. But at the same time, there is a point at which, if you're managing an agency or a set of agencies or a region, your only real cost is human capital. So when you've got to squeeze human capital in order to make more profit, it means people have to work harder, people have to work quicker, and perhaps you've got to trim people. And I lived through a period in the UK and certainly in Europe when there was a big meltdown. And a lot of people were put on the streets by the industry. And it's a difficult place to be, because when you put people on the streets, there are no jobs to go to.
Sure.
So the industry shrinks quite dramatically. And so I just wondered if there wasn't another way to do this thing. And that's kind of why I decided I needed to step out of that.
But you're in a useful position, having left the United Kingdom recently. Draw some comparisons for us between output there and output in this country. Is there a fundamental difference in the approach to advertising?
I wish there was more of a difference, to be honest with you, because I worry that we haven't really indigenized our work as much as I think we could. From going to Cannes year after year, as I do. When you look at the work that comes out of South America, there is a distinct South American flavor about it. It's wonderful. You can spot ads that come out of Mexico, Chile, Argentina.
There's an exuberance, isn't
Absolutely.
there?
You can tell. These are.
So what, are we afraid to do it in this country?
No, I think we're just kind of probably a little bit too, there's too much remnant of our kind of colonial past. I think there's too much of a drive to do advertising that kind of echoes and apes the European style of advertising, where we are capable of doing great indigenous advertising. I mean, remember seriously, those kind of things. It's just disappeared, and I think a lot of it may be because young creative people think that they need to do that kind of work so that they can get those kind of jobs overseas. So it's almost like a ticket out into the wider advertising world to do advertising that is kind of recognized as being Eurocentric as opposed to Afrocentric, and I think we should do much more Afrocentric.
What's the other single biggest issue, do you think, that's facing global advertising right now?
Well, I'll tell you what I don't think is an issue. I don't think that digital is an issue. I think it's such a non-issue, and it's really becoming
and we've become
very
obsessed with it,
irritating, really. I remember the days when television first came to South Africa, and we as agencies bought these people out from America and from the UK and from Europe who knew about this new medium, television. And we paid them a fortune, and we gave them serious motor cars. I was just getting into the industry at that time. And really, it was just another medium. It boiled down to be another medium. And there was this doomsday prophecy about print and cinema, and everyone survived and everyone reordered. Digital is a platform, and it's an extremely important platform, and there's still room for all the other media. So it is not going to fundamentally change our industry.
So one of your clients comes to you and says, give me a digital solution over everything else? What are you going to say to them?
I'm going to say that digital is part of the solution, and in fact, it's a carrier of part of the solution. But in every case, let's give you a big idea, and let's find the best way in which we can get that big idea to your audience. And part of it will undoubtedly be digital, but it may not all be digital.
You've started this agency, and you proudly say, with 1,000 years of experience, I'm just giving 100 years of experience.
Yeah, 800 of mine. Yeah.
So what's the thinking? And I'm cynical. I'm saying to myself, not another startup agency.
Oh, no.
I see them every week.
We're three very good friends, and we've been friends for many, many years. So John and I worked together at Ogilvy on and off for about 20 odd years. Paul and I have been friends for about 35, 40 years. We know each other very well. And I wanted two partners who I trusted, and implicitly that we could work together to do this thing. So we're the three old farts. We've called it old friends because the young people don't really want to work with a company called old farts.
Not surprised.
Yes. Anyway, it was going to be called Old Farts and Young Turks. It's now called Old Friends and Young Talent. But the point really of the thing was to say, we've got all this experience, and we want to actually take it to the next level of young South Africans coming into the industry. And the single biggest issue for us is not starting a new agency, it's about skills transfer. There's an element of social upliftment in this thing as well, because I stood up at the advertising congress that was recently held, and Jeremy, there were 600 people there, and guess what? 10% of them were of colour. I mean, that's our industry. That's nearly 20 years later.
And it's back to that indigenization of advertising, the point that you raised.
Precisely. So that's the whole point of our business. You know, we've taken 8 really fabulously talented young people, and we've given them a chance. This is not an NGO. But what we've done is we've set aside 26% of the company for these kids, and for kids that will keep coming through. So they're basically on a year's contract with us. Those that we can keep and we want to keep, we will keep after a year. Those that we can't, we will help find jobs. But their biggest problem has been that they've qualified either as designers or as writers, and the industry won't give them a chance. They can't get in. Currently, the estimate is that there's 970,000 graduates in South Africa without jobs, and another 70,000 will come through this year. So we are going to clock 1 million graduates in this country without work. I think it's beholden to the entire industry to give these kids a chance. Whether you be in mining, wherever you be, you've got to give these kids a chance. And we're actually working on a program with an NGO called Pretoria, which I think will be a fabulous program about finding ways for SMEs to take on these young people without falling foul of, you know, stringent labour laws, etc., because that seems to worry the SMEs a lot. So that's a big part of the business. But no, we want to make, a big impact on the South African advertising industry.
Now a story on how a university is promoting its brand pedigree. As we approach the end of the academic year, the real work for tertiary institutions only starts now. Campus marketing is becoming more and more competitive, with just over 20 public universities vying for enrollment. So here's the question: how do you make sure you become the university of choice for all those prospective students? Well, the first step is to find an innovative and interactive way of engaging them and showing them what you have to offer, something that the University of Pretoria seems to have gotten right.
Last year, the Vice Dean of Marketing came to me and asked me whether our students would be prepared to develop a board game to promote the newly established fitness trail, which our Vice Chancellor and Rector, Professor Cheryl de la Rey, had initiated. It's a fitness trail for staff and students to partake in when they're off class or in the evenings or over weekends. The idea was then to promote this, but at the same time to promote the University of Pretoria. And so my 12 students set about devising a game plan. This took them about 2.5 to 3 months. Once the final game had been decided upon, it had an interactive element, it was positive, it was something that would appeal to a broad spectrum of people, staff, students, prospective students and the like, and attract them to the university, but also to the alumni, who our feedback from across the world has been incredibly positive. The students then based the game on everything that is related to UP, or Tukkies as we call it. So it has this incredible flavour of the university, marketing at every step of the way, but also creating incredible enjoyment and fun when learning about the university and what it has to offer. As far as we can find out, there's been nothing like this internationally. And the concept of the game can actually be taken and applied to any institution, so it does have that dimension. And in view of that, I got our legal division to copyright the game so that the students who were involved in this did get some kind of protection. New staff members play the game. We've had raucous laughter, and I never knew that. And even staff who've been here for 20 years are, wow, is that really Tuckies? Does that really happen? Tuckies is very strong on generational enrolment, so I think there's also a spin-off there as well. People get to see the fun that is related and connected to the university and what the university is about.
The debate on the Tuckies board game and the agency talent debate continues on our Facebook page, and when we continue keeping a global music brand alive.